Hard News, hosted by Gary C.Clement. Today's news is made up of so many different issues, and it's hard to keep up. But we all know it's important to keep law enforcement in the community and society, as many in America have a problem doing the right thing. Growing up, my mother always said it's easy to do right, but so many people choose wrong, and once you get in trouble, it's very hard to get out of it. Hard News will tackle all issues that break the barriers of justice for all, freedom for all, and simply a good and strong meaning of democracy for all. The show covers politics, crime, gun violence in our communities, and will introduce guests who have a personal stake in these issues. So without further ado, please enjoy this week of Hard News, hosted by Gary C. Clement. Welcome back for another episode of Hard News, hosted by Gary C. Clement. This day in the news, we have several different topics, but we're going to pick three. Number one is Justice Clarence Thomas. Lavish trips from a billionaire, real estate, a cover-up, money or whatnot toward his wife, and Chief Justice Roberts is the only one who has the power to shut this situation down. Number two, we're talking about gun violence in our community with the Dallas, Texas mall shooting as well as other shootings around the country. Number three, Congressman George Santos indicted by the DOJ, Department of Justice, for lying about his college, using campaign money for personal use, his work history, his mother's death. He refuses to resign his position in Congress. He stole money from a military man, something about his dog. And it appears this is a federal case about misrepresentation, fraud, and misconduct. And the Republicans refuse to do anything about this. Let's hear your thoughts. Call us now. Let us see exactly how you feel about all these issues. With me today is my main man, Mr. Connie McKithen, and we're talking about these issues. Okay, Connie, here we go. Now tell us about your feelings toward Justice Clarence Thomas.
I remember well when he called, George Bush put him on the Supreme Court, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's having trouble because Clarence is a big old liar. I remember quite well. Anita Hill,
Mm-hmm.
he tried to pull out the joint on that woman. She's a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
He disrespected her. And they wanted to put a guy on the Supreme Court. The Thurgood Marshall was the first person that we had of color on the Supreme Court. But Clarence Thomas has, and I say this with the best of intention, Thurgood Marshall did a lot for school integration, a lot for the country, black and white. When you couldn't go to school because of the color of your skin, and during that time, Clarence Thomas was chosen to go on the Supreme Court. Again, politics. He wasn't qualified to be on the Supreme Court. Politics. George Bush put his ass up there. So he got there easy, and it was never for people of color. In this country, whether we like it or not,
Mm-hmm.
if we get a responsible position, we should try to bring people along, put them into a position to do well in the country. It's not only helping you, the individual African American, you're helping the country.
Right.
Too many people have helped this country. Fannie Lou Hamer, Martin King, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, who goes by the name of Stokely was a street name back in the day, but now I think Stokely went to Africa. He died in Africa. Kwame something. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Kwame.
I know who you're talking about. Uh-huh.
Okay. So my thing is, we have to look at those who came before us, and they gave their lives, a lot of them, to make daily life better for African Americans in particular. And we have 40 colleges and universities.
Mm-hmm.
Kwame Nkrumah went to Lincoln University, the first head of state, elected head of state in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to have known Dr. Paul Williams. He was a surgeon. He went to school with Kwame Nkrumah.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Trenton guy,
Okay. So do you think Justice Clarence Thomas was actually nominated for the Supreme Court because he just so happened to have black skin?
Yes, absolutely. Thurgood Marshall was the first Supreme Court justice. Thurgood Marshall was the first Supreme Court justice of African American heritage. Thurgood did a lot for the country, but he went in there trying to fight for people of color. We couldn't go to school, integrated schools, the better schools. So here's Thurgood Marshall, the first African American in this country on the Supreme Court. Clarence came behind him, and I wouldn't say he tried to mess up Thurgood Marshall's name. Clarence is a penny thief, pickpocket guy. And I say this, Anita Hill was working with him. He tried to sleep with this woman. She didn't want nothing to do with Clarence Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
So even Joe Biden went back when he became the president and apologized to her.
Mm-hmm.
He really stepped on that woman's lap, but she's a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I forget which school she went to, but she didn't deserve what Clarence Thomas was trying to do to her.
Right.
He wanted to sleep with the woman, and it got out of hand, and it jeopardized his opportunity to be on the Supreme Court. And at that time, the white politician was for him because they knew that he would do what they tell him to do.
I see.
And this guy Harlan Crow,
Mm-hmm.
who's a billionaire,
Mm-hmm.
bought him.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a Supreme Court justice, no one should be able to buy you. That's the highest court in the land.
Right.
Shameful, shameful.
Mm.
He should resign.
Okay.
And then on top of that, his wife, she was selling influence because the husband was a Supreme Court justice.
Mm-hmm.
So both of them are doing the wrong thing in the high position,
Right. I see. Mm-hmm. Okay.
No sympathy for Clarence Thomas, none.
Right. Okay. All right. Our next issue: gun violence in a Dallas, Texas shopping mall. Did you see any of the footage at all? Did you get a chance to check anything out?
No, I don't recall it in the footage. I just remember the news. Mm-hmm. But that gun violence that was in Texas, right?
Correct. Right. Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I recall about that.
Okay. Because
first and foremost,
mm-hmm.
if we're supposed to be the greatest democracy in the world, that's what we claim,
mm-hmm.
which is not true. Maybe the one that has the influence and the money to create war material. And Eisenhower said, "Keep your eye on the military-industrial complex. They will keep you in war." Mm-hmm. This is Eisenhower, that 5-star general.
Mm-hmm.
So here you go. Guns should not be readily in the hands of anyone who can buy it. What do you need? What do you need with an AK-47? When that bullet go in, it comes out the other side, it takes your face off.
Wow.
Those kind of weapons are only in our society because of money.
Okay.
The NRA is making billions of dollars while our kids are dying. Barack Obama cried when those kids were shot in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Barack Obama couldn't get the Congress to do nothing about taking guns off the streets, making sure those high-power rifles are not sold.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one in government other than those who are getting money from the NRA. Their lobbyists are keeping guns. I can go out tonight and buy AK-47.
Mm-hmm.
I can buy a war machine and walk on the street, shoot down 2 dozen people if I care to do that, or take it in a bag and go into a mall and do that.
Right.
Anybody can do that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what kind of democracy could we have? It's certainly not a democracy that cares about the people. It's a democracy that, because of the money the NRA give politicians, they won't even speak against it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in a hell of a fix.
Right.
The government is not for sale. It's been sold.
Mm-hmm.
Any politician should know that guns like that don't belong in our society. But you can go buy them from the store, no problem.
Right.
You can buy them at gun shows, no problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hear you.
Gary, there is something wrong with our society. Something very wrong. And I'll tell you this. I've been reading a lot of history about people of color giving their lives and people of color saving this country, actually saving this country, and just got out of slavery. While in slavery, they fought to save the country. Nat Turner, a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
And the list go on and on and on.
Right.
And there's something wrong with this democracy.
I hear you. Right. One other, I think before, like I said, we can go back to the gun thing, and I know we're gonna, like I said, it'll keep reoccurring. We'll continue to have problems and stuff there. But I want to talk about this Congressman George Santos, indicted by the Department of Justice in regards to all his lying and everything he's done to become a congressman in this country. How do you feel about that?
George Santos is just an example of how poorly this country's democracy is. Any Republican should have said, put a wall up against this guy. He doesn't belong here. He lied about getting here. He said his mother was killed in 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
He said so many false things. But yet the Republicans said, let him stay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that's what we want to show the world? That we'll take a liar into our government body when you know the guy shouldn't be there? He lied about his identity.
Right.
Santos should be going the first day. When they found out what he did, the Republican Party should have said, not in this party will you come.
Right. So now, would you say then that the campaign violations about the money, would that be the thing that triggered all of this, or probably a combination of different things that triggered this, I guess?
I think looking at what triggered it is a good way to say it, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
But here, I'm not elected to any public office.
Mm-hmm.
But I know one damn thing, and those guys in Washington are not dumb.
Mm-hmm.
By no means. By no means.
Mm-hmm.
Our elected politicians that serve in Washington are serving at the expense of the people who sent them there for the money they can collect.
Mm-hmm.
Be you black, I name you black guys, white guys who went to Washington. When they got there, they stopped making deals, stuffing their pockets. There was an African American congressman from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Someone gave him 100,000. He put 10,000 in the freezer in his house.
Mm-hmm.
I think he put 10 in his pocket
Mhm.
and 90 in the freezer in his house. And
Wow.
what he did not know, that he was being set up.
Mm.
Then when they caught up with him, he started lying about what was going on. They said,
Mhm.
"We know you got $100,000,
Mm. Mm.
and we find $10,000 on you."
Mhm.
Now, what am I saying? His colleagues, not all the people in Washington,
Mhm.
but somewhere along the line, his colleagues were taking money from other people, but they just didn't get caught.
Right.
If you go back and think about people when they're running for office,
Mhm.
they'll say, we're going to Washington to clean up Washington. Why would people use that in their campaign slogan? Because before they get there, they know shit is bad.
Yeah, that's true.
But, but when they get there, they join the forces.
Right.
They become bad. I think Nancy Pelosi is one woman who stood up in Washington for the people.
Mhm.
And there are others, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of politicians who are in Washington to do the job that they were sent there and not being influenced by the money that come from, you know, NRA.
Mhm.
We have right now a sick country. And I'll go back to the days of Martin Luther King. When Martin was catching hell down there in the South, Kennedy knew he was going to be killed,
Mm.
and
Okay.
Johnson knew he was going to be, and Johnson knew he was going to be killed. Kennedy
Mhm.
picked Johnson for his vice president because he couldn't win the South, being a Boston, Massachusetts guy.
Mhm.
Even though he was a multimillionaire, his father had all kinds of money. He could not win the presidency without Lyndon Johnson.
Mm. Okay.
And then Bobby Kennedy was a different guy than John Kennedy.
Mhm.
John Kennedy let it be known, I may sympathize with the black people in this country, but there's very little I can do about it because if I do anything about it, they're gonna take my ass out.
Right.
And they took him out. They took him out anyway.
Wow. Mhm.
Now, was he a bad guy? No, he was heavily influenced by politics,
I see. Mm.
and he couldn't do anything about it because Ethel Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy would go around to the black communities apologizing for what John didn't do, and black people overwhelmingly voted for him.
Mhm.
I remember
Mhm.
quite well,
Mhm.
like it was yesterday,
Right.
November 22nd,
Mhm.
1965, 64.
Mhm.
I forget the date now, the year. I was a I was a student in high school. I think it was in the 11th grade,
Wow.
11th or
Mhm.
12th grade.
Mhm.
Black people were being shot down, water hosed to death. When we did peaceful marching, here come the white boys with the fire truck with the water. Do you know how much pressure come out of the end of a water hose?
A lot.
It can cut you in two.
Mhm.
It can take your head off your body.
Mm.
They put German Shepherd dogs and water hose on black people marching for peaceful coexistence in this country. I saw it.
Mhm.
I became friends with Yolanda King, Martin's oldest daughter.
Mhm.
My wife had an aunt that was very close with Coretta Scott King.
Mhm.
I had a conversation with Andy Young about Idi Amin
Mhm.
when Andy was ambassador to the UN. He used to come to Trenton, and I would talk to him. and he would talk about Idi Amin from Uganda, how bad a guy he was. And he would talk about international politics. And but Andy Young was Martin Luther King, one of Martin Luther King's right-hand men.
Mm-hmm.
Smart, bright preacher, did a lot. He's underserved in terms of what he did for America. Black people don't do things for America for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one thing I like to make a point. No, am I racist? I got no reason to be racist, but I have a reason to look out for my people in my community and for the country. Without the people in my community, we would have no community, and America could not exist without black people. Why I say that? The people that brought here from Africa were farmers. They were farming in West Africa. They kidnapped these people, brought them here, and put them to work for nothing for 300 years. And the masters would rape the females to increase his slave ownership. They would take black women and do what they want with them because they owned them.
Mm-hmm.
What man, even to this day, could own a beautiful black woman and not trying to sleep with her?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about it. They hoard, raped our grandmother, great grandmother, great great grandmothers. When you read about the thing that they did, first of all, the biggest crime was they stole people from Africa, brought them here, and enslaved them. Who gave them the right to enslave another person? African people were not standing on the sideline, take me, take me, take me. They didn't know nothing about no America. They brought them here to grow tobacco and cotton and then sell that stuff back in Europe. And they got it for free. Black people had to sleep in buildings with dirt floors. Can you imagine
Mm-hmm.
the kind of thing that people of color went through that's just not in the history books? This is why this boy down in Florida trying to get all the books off the shelves.
Mm-hmm.
He don't want young white kids to know the truth. You can't hide the truth. You make it worse when you do.
Okay.
These kids need to know that their great grandfathers and mothers treated people of color like animals.
Okay.
They didn't pay them no wages.
Mm-hmm.
They worked them from sun up to sundown. Every now and then they put a movie together. They put a piece in a movie. It's not doing us any good. We need to have comprehensive black study programs in the 40 colleges and universities, which I'm sure they do have. When I went to Rutgers, the first black studies program at Rutgers, my professor said, if you don't get there early, you will never get in.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, the hallway was packed with people.
Mm.
These are white people. White people.
Wow.
Trying to get into the black studies class because they didn't know anything about black people.
Right.
That class was always packed out.
Wow.
Packed out.
Mm-hmm.
Rutgers University, good old Dutch school, Princeton University. White people didn't know nothing about black people. And this was only about 25 years ago.
Right.
They knew our ancestors were slaves. Educated white people knew better, but the average white person on the street didn't know better.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't go to college, didn't go to school. It's fuel for racism. Now you think about people of color today, that we are carrying our own burden on our own shoulders. We have come a long ways. The NAACP, the Urban League, a lot of organizations sprung up and fought for the right to be able to send your kids to a good school, and you can live in any neighborhood you want if you have the money to put yourself there.
Right.
Until America realized that this society, founded on racism, built on racism. When they got to the Americas, there were people living here already. Black people. The American Indians were not white-faced people. When they got here, more Europeans started to come.
Mm-hmm.
So they get free land banks started. And to build a white community, the government made sure they got what they needed. To enslave people from Africa, again, another thing that was created to make money. It was England who tried to stop slave trade. So white boys were thinking back then, they started bringing the black people from Africa and stocking them on the islands in the Caribbean Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So when they need a new slave, they wouldn't have to go over to Africa to get them.
Wow.
Sail your boat right down there to the Caribbean. Every island in the Caribbean is predominantly black. Why?
Mm-hmm.
It was a storage bin for black people from Africa.
Wow.
These are things that need to be talked about, not with fury, not with hatred, but with truth.
Right. I understand.
We're not trying to be white. We don't want to live in white people neighborhoods. We want to live in any neighborhood that we have money to afford to live in.
Right. Right.
We ain't dying to be living next door to a white person. Nor do we care about what they do with their property. But they have the attitude that we're nobody. A lot of white people think like that.
Right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Like this boy, an ex-Marine, see a guy in New York acting up.
Mm-hmm.
He put a chokehold on the boy and kill him.
That's right.
When they asked the black mayor, what do you think? He said, it's being investigated right now. I will not speak on this until my investigation is finished.
Mm-hmm.
Now they found that the guy killed the boy. And that chokehold, being a Marine, he knew damn well what he was doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the kind of racism we got to stop.
Right. I hear you.
Been in the news too many times. They stopped policemen for using chokeholds.
Mm-hmm.
They were professionally trained to put a man in a chokehold. That was all over the country. No more chokehold policemen. And this guy, if he was an ex-Marine, never been in the military, there'd be some room for justice here.
Right. Right.
But his ass got to go to jail.
Absolutely.
There were other people around him that were helping him subdue this guy. He didn't have to kill this boy. He didn't have to kill him.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Haard News, hosted by Gary C.Clement. Haard News is created, written, and produced by Gary C.Clement for G2 Network Media. This production, like all our productions, are produced in-house, and our guest comments are not solely our thoughts or views, but strictly their opinions. We are not responsible for their interpretations of the questions we ask and reserve the right to express our thoughts and opinions separately, with the overall objective to educate, inspire, and promote the positive and intriguing thoughts and news. If you have any news ideas, news stories that you want us to consider for discussion, please send them to gccpresents@yahoo.com. That's G as in Gary, C as in Charles, C as in Charles, presents@yahoo.com. This has been a G2 Network Media Production. Copyright 2023.